My name is Chris Cole. I'm currently the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Community Engagement at the American Marketing Association. I'm here to welcome you all to our Marketer Like Me series. So this series will be a set of interviews hosted by the AMA, an effort to highlight diverse narratives and best practice from senior leaders of color in the marketing industry. I'll be moderating a casual yet insightful conversation with our guests, highlighting their journey into the field, how DEI has contributed to their experience, and sharing lessons they learned along the way. So I have the privilege of being joined by Sharon Harris, who is the current CMO of Jellyfish. So I let her kick us off by taking a few minutes to introduce herself and briefly share what she does in her current role.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you to the AMA. Excited to be here today. I'm Sharon Harris. I'm the Global Chief Marketing Officer of Jellyfish. If you haven't heard of Jellyfish, we are a global digital marketing and communications firm. We are based in 28 different countries with 40 offices around the world. My role is really around building the strategic presence of Jellyfish, both from a brand perspective, from a sales enablement, and a thought leadership. I have a team of 35 marketers across the globe who work in all of the regions to really just amplify our story and really amplify the story of our clients, who are some of the world's leading and most iconic brands, from Nike to Spotify to Uggs, and really helping them advance their digital maturity. So I'm excited to share my story with everyone today.
Awesome. Thank you, Sharon. This is great. So again, as I mentioned, we're going to make this as conversational as possible. So one of my favorite questions as we kind of just get started, as I've learned through working at the AMA, is really understanding how folks got into marketing. So how did you end up in marketing? I know a lot of people kind of find their ways into marketing through different industries, through different roles. Would you like to share a little bit about how you got to be in the industry?
Sure. I think like many people, it wasn't a straight path to marketing. I actually started my career in investment banking. Oh, wow. We were investing in new tech startups. And one of those new startups was at the time called CD Radio. And it ultimately changed its name and became Sirius Satellite Radio. And I was one of the first 20 employees. And so often in a startup, you have everything to do. It's not like you have a truly structured and defined role. And I really just developed a love for marketing. And it really emanates from the idea of true storytelling, of being able to communicate with your audiences, share a story, and help them understand why your brand's going to deliver value, why it's going to delight them and surprise them and expand their life experience. And at the time at Sirius, it was all about 100 channels of commercial-free music in every genre you could think of, from classical to hip hop, to salsa, to merengue, to EDM. And, you know, in that job, I got to really travel across the US. And I often tell people I acted as a politician. I was, you know, shaking hands and kissing babies, whether it was at a NASCAR track or CES or, you know, a county fair in Ohio, and just, you know, evangelizing and sharing the story of Sirius. But that's how I fell into marketing and really grew to love it. And I really grew to love what marketing is capable of. You know, our entire country is built on stories. Yeah. And it's all about which of those stories become embedded in the culture. And marketing is really the engine for that. And when you think about what brands do today, it's not just selling a product, it's selling a lifestyle, it's selling an aspiration, a belief, an image of who you can be or who you will be. And it has such power and such potential. For me, it was really about, I wanted to be involved in an industry that could touch so many people's lives in such a profound way, which I'm sure people are like, oh, you just sell things, but it's far more than that. And I think that's where I think people don't really understand the true power of marketing.
No, yeah. I love that you mentioned that too, especially the emphasis on the storytelling, that impact. And I think, I know at least I can test for me personally, that's been a huge, you know, lesson learned over the past year with the pandemic of, you know, our lifestyle is kind of being completely altered, and, you know, how do we adjust with that and, you know, being more in tune with that. So as you kind of talk with all this great, impact and power and opportunity that marketers have, what have been some of those challenges that you've seen probably this past year with that, really great potential to impact lifestyle, to kind of tell stories and really embed it into the culture that we have in our world?
Well, I think, the last, 18 months has really illuminated the gap. And when I say the gap, it's been the gap in the full spectrum of stories, the stories of Black women, of Latinx communities, transgender. We just haven't seen sort of that full spectrum of all people's lives being covered in some way, shape, or form. We have certain stories that are much more dominant and more prevalent, but we really get to understand all of the potential of humanity when we share more of the stories. And marketing really has lacked that level of diversity and inclusive storytelling. And for me as a marketer, that's where I've seen the most opportunity for new stories to be told in new ways. And I think we started to see that, in movies, and you're starting to see more of it in commercials. But I think the pandemic has allowed us, because it's basically been a massive reset. We were all in our homes. We were glued to every channel we could think of online. And I think a lot of people realized not everyone was being represented. And they weren't being represented in, positive ways, or in ways that were really about driving value or compassion. So I think there's a huge opportunity for the marketing industry to do more and to really do better.
Yeah. And kind of building a little bit further into that, because you raised, just a really great point of, that realization that we've had this past year about what stories have been missing or not really, represented in the industry. What advice do you have for folks that are in marketing right now that are, going through that reset, are realizing, certain stories that have not been incorporated, whether it is in their branding, the voice or messaging at their organization? What are some ways that they can kind of start that journey? Because I know a lot of folks are have taken this, as you mentioned, this past 18 months to, really reflect, assess, and kind of put things into action. So, any advice that you have for folks in the industry that are starting that journey to prioritize those voices, those narratives, and those stories?
Oh, absolutely. I think it starts on the inside. In all organizations, look at who's at the table. Ensure that you have a team that is more representative and more inclusive of all of those cultures and identities, because it's hard to develop stories that are authentic, that are true, that are relevant and respectful if those voices aren't included in the creation process. So it's important that marketers really look at their teams closely and think about who are the audiences that you're trying to reach, who uses your product, who do you want to use your product, where are the greatest opportunities for your product to grow? Because marketing is just not about solely spending the money, but we have to be a driver of the business. And it starts on the inside. And I think once you have a team that is calibrated in a way that's more representative, that you're able to take in all of those stories, which is an amazing mosaic of people, of history, of culture, then you can really start to build narratives and better position your products so that all of those audiences can find their place in your story, because that's when it's going to be the most impactful. Whether it's funny or it pulls on the heartstrings, or it's something that's totally going to, transform their lives. But it really starts there.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I feel like I've definitely felt a lot of that. I mean, minus being like super aware of my emotions this past year and being in tune with like humanity, just because I feel like we've all managed to, navigate a global crisis on multiple levels as we've been in home and, sharing with others. Are there any like standout, instances, whether it's at your time at Jellyfish or, other organizations that you've seen do that really well, where they, have folks at the table, or, maybe it was an ad or something that you saw that like really kind of connect the dot where, it really showed that people are thinking about things differently. They are including those voices. Any examples of that you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, I think there's been some amazing creative out in the market, whether it's come from the likes of Nike or Procter & Gamble, which has really been leading the way with some amazing creative that speaks to issues of race, of culture, and just representation visually in commercial spaces. I think they've done some amazing work. Deckers, one of our Jellyfish clients, has just sort of in thinking about who's wearing all those great UGG slippers these days. As we were in our homes and we wanted something comfortable, we were ditching our high heels and sort of just sitting on the couch working. And I think you've started to see it more where the representation and the idea of family has shifted. I love some of the commercials that Walmart has done where you see that you have blended families. You have what we would call non-traditional families. You have families that cut across, different ethnicities, different races, and different cultures. And that's more representative of what the real world is. So those are really, really beautiful to see because I think we all see ourselves in those stories, or we can find a place in them. There isn't so much of a them and an us, but now it's much more about we.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I feel like, especially, in the world, you always, certain groups of people, we not like to think of ourselves as, especially as like Black folks, we're not a monolithic and we don't have that same experience. So what you mentioned earlier about that intersection, I think spoke to me really well. And like you mentioned right now, you're seeing that in brands and organizations, really catching on to that, because I think it's a lot more complex than what we initially think. And so the more that we see that intersection of families, of, different ways folks identify in different spaces, I think it ultimately speaks to folks and they can, kind of see those messages and really connect with them on a, authentic and like human level that isn't just buy this product, buy this. It's, really kind of playing towards, some of those everyday life experiences that often don't really get captured in a storytelling process. So I'm glad you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always wonderful when a marketer really reflects the real world. Yeah. I think that's when you find the most authentic and true stories. But I think that's when you really make that mind-body connection, and you really get the heart and the emotion involved from the consumer, because it's like, wow, that's something out of my life, or that's someone that I know, or that's me. And that's when, marketing really is operating at its highest level, is when someone can say, that's me, that speaks to me.
Yeah, no, that's a really good feeling. I feel like that's like the ultimate feeling you want to have going through any of that process. So kind of along those lines and somewhat related, as we kind of talk about DEI, I feel like we've definitely mentioned, the connection of what role it plays in marketing, as you mentioned, with the storytelling and really allowing folks to be, seen in the brands and products, et cetera, as a consumer, just as a person navigating this world. How have you kind of integrated, again, your own life experiences into the work that you do, whether it's, from a DEI lens or, as your own identity, how do you leverage that in your leadership style and the work that you do now?
Well, I mean, obviously, as a Black woman being a global chief marketing officer, there are not that many of us. Yeah. And it was important that, I brought my own experiences, my own perspective, and my own relationship to the world, to this job, because it really is about making sure that space has been created to tell all of these stories. And I think DE&I, apart from it's the right thing to do, it's also great for your business. I mean, Black people have the buying power of over $1 trillion. Why wouldn't you appeal to that marketplace? When you look at Latinx or the LGBTQA community, why wouldn't you appeal to those communities? Tremendous amounts of disposable income, growing affluency, key buying targets. So if you're not appealing to them by telling their stories, reflecting them in the, commercials and the print ads and the digital ads, then you're missing an opportunity. Once again, it's not marketing for marketing's sake. It's marketing to drive the business forward, to grow the profitability. And growing the profitability means you're uncovering and tapping new audiences. You're driving that purchase intent and you're driving those conversions. So in order to do that, you want to use those D&I practices because it allows you to do more, reach more audiences, and convert more audiences. It's a very simple equation.
Yeah.
I think the people have often gotten stuck in is some sense of ideology and, well, it's always an us and them conversation.
Yeah.
No, we're all human beings. We all have the same dreams and hopes and wishes, desires and aspirations. You know, people want to buy a home. They want to see their kids go to college. They want to go on a great vacation. They want to eat delicious food. They want to wear great clothes. It is not only the hopes of one group of people. It's everyone. Everyone has those same fundamental desires.
Yeah.
And when you think about happiness, joy, people want to laugh. That's not just for one group of people. It's really for everyone. So it's about having the ability to have that inclusive language, those inclusive stories, but to create a real sense of belonging. As I said, it's very much about the we. What does the we look like? The we comes in all shapes, sizes, forms, colors, languages, and ways of living. So it's just a matter of, it's important for business to be successful, to be profitable, and to be sustainable. I think any business today that is not representative and responding to the culture of today is missing a tremendous opportunity. And they're not going to stay in business for very long. The culture today is very vocal, it's very active, and it literally casts its vote with its dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the key.
Oh, that's huge. I completely agree and definitely can understand that process of just, getting down to the basic essentials of like humanity. Again, we all have our lived experiences and, those all are attributed with their own, themes and commonalities, especially within any group. But, at the end of the day, as you mentioned, it's just like people want to be happy. People want to see success. And like, I think that's a common way as we kind of continue to talk about, because again, DEI is always, sometimes the conversation is, this is like exhausting. This is a lot to talk about. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but when you kind of peel back those layers, I think it's, those human desires and needs that we have as we navigate the world are some of those things that, hopefully can bring us, moving forward and doing this work together. And there was something actually you mentioned earlier that I wanted to briefly tap into, being, a CMO and a Black woman, how have you navigated that? Because I know, at least in my career, as I, tend to kind of move up into more senior level roles, there's not a lot of people that look like me as I look around. And so what are ways that, you also, advocate, have your voice in those spaces, but also find, that space for you to connect with other, Black women or other, Black leaders, just to kind of have that space to share best practices. Because I know that's been really helpful for me, is having that space and community to lean on when I'm navigating difficult times, but also, not being afraid to be that only person and kind of lead the way and, find ways to make a change through that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I'm really privileged is to be a founding member of BECA, which is the Black Executive Chief Marketing Officers Association. I was founded by Jerry DeVard. And Jerry was probably one of the first Black CMOs I ever saw. She worked at Verizon. And BECA has brought together, Black CMOs at Target, Adidas, Netflix, Amazon Prime, UPS. And it's wonderful to have that community of other Black CMOs to not only share best practices, but to have those uncomfortable conversations around how do you manage this? It's really created an amazing safe space for all of us to celebrate our successes, but to also talk about the challenges that we face, which are many. I mean, it's a difficult role. I mean, the responsibilities of the CMO have changed quite a lot. We really are growth drivers for the business. And with that comes a tremendous amount of pressure. And when you intersect that with issues of race, of gender, it really intensifies all of those environments.
Yeah.
So having a space where you feel that sense of psychological safety, you have other people to draw on their experiences to help you really grow and shape your perspective has been utterly invaluable. And one of the key mantras of Becca, apart from just supporting each other, is how do we mentor, nurture, and grow that next generation of CMOs, which I'm the most excited for, because you're right. As you move up into these C-suite levels, you're the only person. I'd love to see there be more people. And I'd love to know that there was a strong bench behind me because, you only have these seats for a short period of time. But I want to know that there are other people who can come behind, fill these seats, and thrive and grow into other sectors and other parts of the world. So that's really the mantra, for Becca. It's about providing that community, that support, but also nurturing the next phase. So, new generations have these opportunities, but it's key. It's really.
Yeah, that's a huge part. I think that I've started to recognize in my journey, again, the power that comes in mentorship and, leaving positions or spaces a little bit better for generations as they come into those new positions. And, really that's kind of a big part of, out of the day-to-day work that we do. But I know that's always centered in that space where it's like, yeah, it was difficult for me to navigate this, but maybe that means someone coming up behind me is a little less difficult for them to navigate and also thrive and really become the best version of themselves in whatever role they go. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up, any last minute things that you have as far as resources? I know you talked about Becca and some really great things that we've been talking about, but anything that you've read, a resource, or anything that has been really valuable for you in your role in marketing, or again, just, as a leader in the industry and some of the work that you do that you might be able to share with our AMA community?
Well, certainly the AMA has been a great resource. But I would also say, look out and tap into other communities, whether it's in your city or your market. There are always groups around marketing. For me, some of my major go-tos, Harvard Business Review is a staple, going through that. And they're just, right now, there's so many great podcasts out there on marketing from, former professors and executives that you should be listening to and following. And then last is really, from a marketing perspective, I am a big believer in data. So I am all about the research. So whether it's Gartner, eMarketer, business intelligence, it's really important that you understand what those trends are and what's the data behind them. Because as a marketer, you're going to need to build out a case that's going to have to deliver some sort of return on investment and the positive outcomes for your business. So it's important that you understand where those trends are coming from. But I definitely say, lean into all those organizations. And certainly if you have interest in, diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are a number of avenues to participate. For marketing and advertising, I highly recommend AdColor. Their conference will be virtual again this year. But once again, it's about having built that great community of people to learn and grow from, and having those spaces where you can be seen, heard, and valued for what you bring to the table. So all of those are just, just great resources for anyone. But definitely, the AMA has done a wonderful job with all of this and certainly been super helpful for me in my career.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I love that ending on that community, because especially after everything, we've all had to navigate, I think that's something that's definitely bubbled up to the top of importance of, like, people just want to connect with people, and that, unfortunately has been impacted this past year. But, as some of those resources or recommendations you have, I think really help fill that void, because I think, as humans, we naturally want to connect with people, and, that really just adds to that connection of us learning, always growing in our field, and, really just finding opportunities to help us at any time that we have. So yeah, I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to really kind of talk a little bit more and hear your story. It's been, an honor and a privilege really just to again, take this time to learn a little bit more about you, have this conversation, and really share it with our AMA community really at large. Because I think, that's a big goal of this whole Marketer Like Me series. Prior to this, I've, read about you, I've known some of the work you're doing, but, just getting the time to briefly kind of talk about your story, highlight it, especially this time when we're looking to inspire the future generation of marketers that, sometimes there are marketers that look like them, and you can find a connection whether they don't or they do. But, this is all part of, how we better share those stories and really, impact on that culture. So any last words you want to share before we wrap up for the group?
No, I just really want to thank you and thank the AMA for this opportunity. I mean, I think it's so important when we think about, future generations of marketers. When you're able to see people that look like you, that sound like you, that may have had similar life experiences, it puts everything within your reach. It becomes more possible. And I think that's really where I'm so excited for this series to go, because it will expose to a lot of people that you don't have to have the perfect path. You can go off and do all sorts of things and have a really fulfilling and successful career in marketing, because it's really about the full person. And, all of your experiences really attribute to how successful you're going to be in this space. But it's really exciting to share my story with everyone. And, I'm excited for the future stories to come, Chris. But this has actually been a real pleasure. So thank you.